She had promised herself that she wouldn't go on any more dates. Too many disappointments, too many people pretending to be something they were not. Every time she thought maybe this one would be different, she ended up walking home feeling smaller, more tired, and more certain that love wasn't for her. So when her friend begged her to meet a guy she knew, she laughed it off at first. "I'm done with dating," she said. But her friend wouldn't stop insisting. She said, "Just one coffee. You don't have to like him. Just give it 30 minutes. After days of refusing, she finally gave in, not because she believed anything would come of it, but because she was tired of her friend's constant nudging. "Fine," she said. But only coffee, and only 30 minutes. The date was set for Saturday afternoon at a small cafe she liked, quiet, warm, and away from the noise of the city. She reached early on purpose. That way, if the man turned out to be boring or too talkative, she could finish her drink quickly and leave without feeling rude. She sat by the window, watching the street outside, trying not to think about how strange it felt to be here again, waiting for someone she didn't know. When he walked in, she noticed he looked ordinary. No flashy clothes, no forced charm. He scanned the room and spotted her. His smile was gentle, the kind that reached his eyes. He walked over and greeted her politely. His voice was calm, not loud or showy. It wasn't love at first sight. She didn't believe in that anymore. But there was something easy about the way he carried himself. They ordered coffee. The first few minutes went as she expected. Polite small talk, questions about work, weather, and hobbies. She gave short answers, hoping he'd understand she wasn't in the mood for long stories. But he didn't push. He listened, nodded, and smiled when she made a small joke about her terrible cooking. She noticed he wasn't trying to impress her. Most men she met before would talk endlessly about their achievements, trying to prove they were worth her time. But he didn't. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When she spoke about her work, he didn't interrupt or try to top her story. He just listened. 15 minutes passed, then 30. She glanced at her phone, realizing her self-promised time limit had already passed. But strangely, she didn't feel like leaving. He wasn't exciting in a dramatic way, but there was something peaceful about being in his company. He told her about how he liked taking long evening walks after work because it helped him think. She laughed and said she preferred sleeping early because she hated mornings. That made him laugh too. There was something about his laughter, genuine, not forced. It made her smile without realizing it. Time slipped away quietly. The waitress came by to ask if they wanted to order something else. She looked at the clock and realized they had been sitting there for almost 2 hours. She blinked in surprise. "Wow," she said softly. "I didn't even notice the time." He smiled. "That's a good sign, right?" She laughed. "Maybe it is." They decided to take a short walk outside. The sky was turning gold as the sun began to set. They walked along the street talking about little things, food, music, funny moments from childhood. He told her about how he once got lost as a kid trying to follow an ice cream truck, and she couldn't stop laughing. She told him about her fear of elevators and how she once climbed 12 floors because she refused to get in one. He said he admired her bravery, and she rolled her eyes but secretly felt touched. They ended up walking to a small park nearby. It was quiet, with only a few families and couples around. They sat on a bench, and for a while neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was calm. She looked around and thought how strange it was that a few hours ago she'd been ready to give up on dating completely, and here she was, sitting with a stranger who somehow didn't feel like one. He broke the silence first. "You know," he said softly, "I almost didn't come today." She turned to him, surprised. "Why not?" He shrugged. "I've had a few dates lately that went nowhere. I was starting to think maybe I'm not the kind of person people want to get to know." His honesty caught her off guard. She wasn't used to hearing such simple truth from someone she'd just met. "Funny," she said quietly. "I felt the same way." He smiled at her, a warm, understanding smile that made her chest tighten a little. There was something real in that look. No games, no pretending. They sat there until the sky turned deep orange and the streetlights flickered on. She realized she didn't want the evening to end, but she didn't know how to say it. Before she could speak, he said, "It's getting late. Should I walk you to your car?" She nodded, and they walked slowly back toward the cafe parking lot. The air had turned cool, and she pulled her scarf a little tighter. He noticed and offered to wait with her until her cab arrived. When it did, she turned to him and said softly, "Thanks. For today. I didn't expect to actually enjoy it." He smiled again, that quiet smile she was beginning to like. "Me neither," he said. "But I'm glad we both showed up." As she sat in the cab, watching him fade into the distance, she caught herself smiling. She tried to remind herself that it was just one date. It didn't mean anything. But deep down, something in her heart felt lighter, like a small part of her that had been closed off for too long had opened just a little. That night, as she changed into her pajamas, she replayed bits of the evening in her mind. The way he listened, the way he smiled, the way time had passed so easily. She picked up her phone to send a quick thank you text, then stopped. She didn't want to seem too eager, so she put it down and went to bed. But she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept wandering back to his calm voice, his quiet laugh, and how comfortable she had felt sitting beside him. The next morning, she found a message on her phone. It was from him. "I had a really good time yesterday. No pressure, but if you'd ever like to grab coffee again, I'd like that." She smiled before she even realized she was doing it. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She wanted to play it cool, to wait a few hours before replying. But then she thought, why not? "Sure," she wrote back. "Coffee sounds nice." When she hit send, she didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know that this small moment, this simple yes, would slowly change everything she thought she knew about love. For now, she just knew that what was meant to be a short date had turned into something she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't excitement or infatuation. It was something softer, deeper, like the beginning of a quiet promise she didn't even realize she wanted. The following days felt lighter. She found herself checking her phone more often, wondering when he would text again. And when he did, it wasn't with forced flattery or empty words. He sent simple, thoughtful messages, asking how her day was going or telling her about a funny thing that happened at work. Each conversation felt easy, like they'd known each other for much longer than a single meeting. She told her friend about the date. Her friend grinned, clearly pleased. "See," she said. "Sometimes it's worth giving people a chance," she laughed. "I'm not saying it's serious," she replied quickly. "It was just nice." But inside, she knew it was more than that. Something about this man felt different. She couldn't explain it, but when she thought about him, there was no rush, no pressure, just calm. Maybe that was what she had been missing all along. She had gone into the date expecting to check off a box, to prove to her friend that she was trying. She expected to sit through an hour of small talk, fake a smile, and leave politely. But instead, she had met someone who reminded her that maybe, just maybe, good people still existed. She didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in a long time, she felt curious instead of afraid. She didn't know if this would last, but she hoped it would. Because something in her heart whispered that she might have just stumbled into something that could last much longer than a short date. She didn't say it out loud, not yet, but deep down she knew. This might be the beginning of something that could quietly, unexpectedly become forever. The next time they met, it was raining. She almost canceled the plan. The weather was dull, her hair wouldn't behave, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to go through with another date. But something inside her told her to go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that quiet comfort she had felt the first time. Whatever it was, she found herself standing outside the same cafe, holding her umbrella and looking around for him. He was already there, waiting with a takeaway cup in his hand. When he saw her, he smiled and lifted the cup slightly. "Hot chocolate," he said, walking toward her. "You mentioned last time that coffee gives you a headache." She blinked, a little surprised that he remembered such a small detail. "You actually remembered that?" she asked with a smile. "Of course," he said simply. "Details matter." It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt genuine. She took the cup and they began walking under the same umbrella. The rain came down softly, the sound mixing with their laughter as they tried to avoid puddles. She hadn't realized how natural it could feel to walk beside someone without awkward silence or forced talk. They found a small bakery nearby and went inside to escape the rain. The place smelled like sugar and fresh bread, and they sat near the window, watching the drops slide down the glass. They talked again, the way they always did. Easy, unplanned, open. She told him how she had always wanted to travel alone, but never found the courage. He shared that he once tried to start his own business and failed, but learned more from that failure than from anything else. Failure teaches you what success hides, he said with a calm smile. She looked at him for a moment, thinking how different he was from the men she had known before. He didn't try to sound smart, he just spoke from experience. Time once again passed without them noticing. Every time she glanced at her phone, she would tell herself she should probably leave soon. But she didn't. She liked the way he made her feel. Not excited in a rush, but peaceful in a quiet way. After the rain stopped, they walked through the nearby streets. He pointed out small things: the street musician playing an old tune, the child splashing in puddles, the cat sleeping under a cart. He seemed to notice everything around him, and that made her start noticing too. At one point, she stopped and said, "You really pay attention to small things, don't you?" He smiled. Small things make up most of life. Big moments only happen sometimes. She thought about that long after she went home. Maybe that was why he felt so different. He made ordinary moments feel special without even trying. Days turned into weeks, and they continued meeting. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes for walks, and sometimes just to sit in silence. There was no rush between them, no pressure to define what they were. They were simply two people learning about each other, one story at a time. He learned that she hated winter but loved wearing sweaters. She learned that he collected old postcards from places he'd never been to. He told her that it made him feel like he was part of someone else's story for a moment. She laughed and said that was oddly poetic. Their bond grew not from big dates or fancy gifts, but from quiet understanding. One evening she called him just to talk. It wasn't planned. She had a long, stressful day at work, and for some reason she thought of him. When he answered, his voice was warm and calm. "Rough day?" he asked. She sighed. "You could say that." "Tell me about it," he said. And so she did. She told him about her workload, her coworkers, and how she felt invisible sometimes. He didn't interrupt or try to fix her problems. He just listened. Really listened. By the time she finished, she realized she was smiling again. "You have a strange effect," she said softly. "How so?" "You make bad days feel lighter." There was silence for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe that's what we all need. Someone to share the weight." After that, their calls became more frequent. Sometimes they spoke for hours about everything and nothing. She started looking forward to his messages in the morning and his calls at night. It became a quiet routine, one she didn't want to break. One Saturday, he invited her to a small art fair happening in the city. She almost said no because she wasn't sure if she was ready to see him in a more public setting, but she went anyway. The fair was lively, filled with colors, laughter, and the smell of popcorn. He walked beside her, occasionally pointing at paintings or handmade crafts, making light jokes that made her laugh. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just himself. That was what she liked most. He never pretended. At one stall, she stopped to admire a painting of a sunrise. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It is," he agreed. "But I think it's more about what it makes you feel." "What does it make you feel?" she asked. He thought for a moment, then said, "Hope. Like no matter how bad the night is, morning always comes." Something about those words stayed with her long after the fair ended. When he dropped her home that evening, she felt a warmth she couldn't explain. He didn't try to hug her or say anything overly romantic. He just smiled and said, "Today was nice, thank you for coming." As she closed the door behind her, she leaned against it, her heart beating faster than usual. She wasn't sure what this was turning into, but it felt right. Not forced, not rushed. Just right. A few days later, she found herself thinking about him more than she wanted to admit. She caught herself smiling while reading his old messages. It scared her a little, the idea of feeling again after being numb for so long, but she didn't want to stop. One evening, while walking home from work, she passed by the park where they had sat after their first date. The bench was empty, the sky painted orange by the setting sun. She sat down, remembering how calm she had felt that day. She pulled out her phone and sent him a message, "Guess where I am?" He replied almost instantly. The park? She smiled. Yes, the same bench. A few minutes later, he called. Stay there, he said. I'm nearby. She waited, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Soon, she saw him walking toward her, holding 2 cups of tea. He sat beside her, handed her one and said, You didn't think I'd let you sit here alone, did you? They sat quietly sipping tea, watching the city lights come on one by one. She looked at him and realized how comfortable she felt next to him. No pressure to talk, no need to pretend. After a while, she said, Do you ever get scared? He turned to her. Scared of what? Of getting close to someone again. He looked thoughtful for a moment before replying, All the time. But I also know that distance doesn't protect you. It only keeps you lonely. She stared at him, feeling something shift inside her. For so long, she had built walls around her heart, believing they kept her safe. But sitting there, she realized maybe it was time to let someone climb over them. That night, as they parted ways, he said, You know, I didn't plan on meeting someone who'd make ordinary days feel special. She smiled softly. Neither did I. As she walked home, her heart felt light. Not in the fast, dizzy way that crushes make you feel, but in the steady way that comfort does. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of where this might lead. She wasn't overthinking it. She just wanted to see what would happen next. She didn't know if this was love yet. Maybe it was too early. But she knew it was something worth holding on to. Every small conversation, every shared silence, every moment felt like a piece of something bigger forming between them. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about promises. It was about presence. Being there, showing up, listening, and caring in small, quiet ways. And maybe, she thought, as she unlocked her door and stepped inside, that's how love begins. Not with fireworks, but with the sound of rain, the warmth of shared tea, and the gentle feeling that you've found someone who understands you without needing to ask why. She smiled to herself, whispering softly, It was supposed to be a short date. But in her heart she knew this was the beginning of something that could last forever. The weeks that followed brought a quiet rhythm into her life. She didn't even notice when he became part of her routine. It just happened naturally. A message in the morning, a call in the evening, a meetup once or twice a week. There was no rush, no heavy words about love or commitment, yet everything about it felt steady, real, and warm. One Sunday morning, he asked if she wanted to join him for a walk by the lake. It was one of his favorite spots, he said. She agreed, curious to see the place that made him sound so peaceful whenever he mentioned it. The day was bright but not too warm. The lake shimmered under the sunlight and ducks floated lazily near the edges. She felt the cool breeze brush against her hair and smiled. You come here often? She asked as they started walking. Whenever I need to think, he said. It's quiet here. Helps me remember what matters. She looked at him, curious. And what matters to you? He smiled, kicking a small stone along the path. Time, people, moments you can't buy or replace. She didn't say anything right away. She just watched the way he spoke, calm, thoughtful, never trying too hard. Most people she'd dated before tried to impress her with stories or big plans. But he didn't need to do that. His simplicity felt more powerful than any grand gesture. They walked for almost an hour, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to the sound of the water. When they stopped to sit on a wooden bench, he turned to her and asked, What about you? What matters to you? She thought about it for a while before answering. Peace, she said softly. I used to think love was about excitement and butterflies, but now I just want peace, the kind where you can sit beside someone and not feel the need to fill the silence. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. I think that's what real love feels like. Something in her chest tightened at those words. She didn't reply, but inside she knew he was right. After that day, their bond deepened in ways she hadn't expected. They started sharing more. About their lives, The past, the things they regretted, the dreams they hadn't told anyone. One evening, she told him about the time she almost moved to another country for work but backed out at the last minute. "I was scared," she admitted. "I told myself it wasn't the right time, but maybe I was just afraid of being alone." He listened quietly, then said, "Sometimes fear isn't weakness, it's just our heart's way of protecting us until we're ready." His words stayed with her long after. She realized that whenever he spoke, he didn't just talk. He made her think, reflect, and see herself differently. A few days later, she decided to surprise him with something simple. She baked cookies, not perfect ones, a little uneven and slightly overbaked, but made with care. She packed them in a small box and went to meet him at the cafe where they first met. When she handed him the box, he laughed softly. "You baked? Don't sound so surprised," she said playfully. "I can cook a little." He opened the box, took a bite, and smiled. "They're perfect." "They're really not," she said, laughing. "You don't have to be polite." "I'm not," he replied. "They taste like effort." "That's better than perfection." His words made her heart flutter in a way she couldn't explain. She realized she hadn't felt this kind of warmth in years, the kind that wasn't loud or dramatic but soft and safe. They spent the afternoon talking as usual. He told her about his parents, how his father used to take him fishing when he was young, and how those quiet mornings taught him patience. She told him about her childhood dreams of becoming a writer, but how life had pulled her in another direction. "You should still write," he said. "Even if it's just for yourself." She smiled but shook her head. "I wouldn't know where to start." "Start with what you feel," he said simply. "That's always a good beginning." Something about his belief in her made her want to try again. That night, she sat at her desk with a notebook she hadn't used in years, and began writing about the day they met. The words came slowly at first, but then they started to flow. The rain, the hot chocolate, his calm voice. She didn't know why she was writing it, but it felt good. It felt real. Days turned into months, and their connection continued to grow stronger. They didn't label it, but it was clear to both of them that something deep was forming. They met families, shared small traditions, and became part of each other's everyday lives. Her friends noticed the change in her. One of them said, "You look happier lately." She smiled and replied, "Maybe I just stopped expecting too much." But deep down, she knew it wasn't that. It was him, his quiet steadiness, his kindness, the way he made her feel seen without asking for anything in return. One evening, they went to a small rooftop restaurant he had been wanting to try. The view of the city lights was breathtaking. As they sat there talking about random things, she realized how much she trusted him. It wasn't just comfort, it was something more. At one point, she looked at him and said, "Do you ever think about the future?" He smiled, "Sometimes. But I try not to plan too far ahead. Life changes too quickly. So you just take things one day at a time?" she asked. He nodded. "Exactly. I believe in moments. Right now, this one, sitting here with you, this is all that matters." She couldn't help but smile. He had a way of making even the simplest words sound meaningful. Later that night, as he dropped her home, he said something that stayed in her mind. "I don't know where life will take us, but I'm grateful it brought me here. To you." She didn't reply right away. She just looked at him, her heart too full for words. When he drove away, she stood by the gate for a long time, thinking about everything. She wasn't used to things feeling this calm. Usually, relationships came with uncertainty, confusion, or constant guessing. But with him, it was different. There was no need to question where she stood. He made her feel sure without saying much. A few days later, he got busy with work and couldn't meet for a week. She missed their talks, the small moments, his quiet presence. But instead of worrying, she trusted him. And that was new for her. Trust. When they finally met again, he looked tired but happy to see her. "It's been a long week," he said, sitting down beside her at the park bench that had become their spot. She smiled gently. "Then you're in the right place." He looked at her with that same soft gaze that always melted her worries. "I think I am." They talked for hours that evening, about work, life, and the things that made them both laugh. At one point, he reached out and gently held her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it said more than any words could. She didn't pull away. She didn't need to. In that quiet moment, she realized something. Love wasn't about chasing fireworks or dramatic moments. It was about steady warmth like the way his hand felt against hers. It was about showing up, listening, remembering small details, and choosing each other every day. When she got home that night, she opened her notebook again and wrote, "Maybe love isn't something that happens all at once. Maybe it grows slowly in moments you don't even notice, until one day it's just there, quietly holding your heart." She put her pen down and smiled. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what could go wrong. She was grateful for what was right. The woman who once promised herself she'd never go on another date was now finding peace in something she never expected. A love that felt calm, safe, and endless. And as she fell asleep that night, she whispered softly into the dark, "It was supposed to be short. But maybe forever starts this way." Life has a way of testing people just when things start to feel right. For months, everything between them had been peaceful and steady. They had grown close, sharing countless small moments that had become the heartbeat of their connection. She felt like she had finally found something real, something that made her believe in love again. But one quiet evening, while they sat together at their usual park bench, he told her something that made her heart sink. "I might have to move," he said softly. She turned to him, her smile fading. "Move? What do you mean?" He hesitated before answering. "My company's opening a new branch in another city. They've asked me to lead the project. It's a big opportunity." She tried to smile, but her hands grew cold. "How long?" "At least a year," he said. "Maybe more." The words echoed in her mind like a slow wave crashing. She looked away, trying to hide the sudden sting in her eyes. That's great news," she managed to say, forcing a smile. "You've worked hard for this." He nodded, but his eyes showed he wasn't celebrating. "It doesn't feel like great news right now." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their thoughts. She wanted to be happy for him, but all she could think about was the empty space his absence would leave behind. She had grown used to his presence, his voice, his calmness, his steady care. The idea of losing that terrified her. That night, when she got home, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Part of her wanted to tell him not to go, but she knew she couldn't do that. He had worked for this opportunity, and she couldn't be the reason he turned it down. The next few days were heavy. They tried to act normal, going out like usual, but there was always something unspoken hanging in the air. The thought of distance lingered like a quiet shadow between them. On his last weekend before leaving, they decided to spend the day together by the lake. The same place where he once told her that time and moments were what mattered most. They walked slowly, barely speaking. Sometimes words felt too heavy, and silence said everything. When they reached the bench, he turned to her and said, "I don't want this to be goodbye." She looked at him, trying to stay composed. "Then what is it?" "It's just, see you soon," he said, "because I will come back. I don't know when, but I will." She nodded, even though her heart ached. "Just promise me you'll take care of yourself," she said softly. "I promise," he replied. "And you promise me you won't shut down while I'm gone. Keep living. Keep smiling, please." She tried to laugh, but her voice broke a little. "That's a big request." He reached out and gently took her hand. "You've given me peace. Let me believe you'll keep some for yourself, too." When they finally said goodbye that evening, it wasn't dramatic. No long speeches, no tears in public. Just a quiet hug that said everything their words couldn't. She stood there watching him walk away until he disappeared into the distance. The next few weeks felt strange. The silence that used to be comforting now felt heavy. She missed his messages, his calls, his laughter. They still talked, but it wasn't the same. Texts couldn't capture the warmth of his presence. Calls couldn't fill the empty space beside her. Still, she kept going. She worked harder, met her friends, and tried to stay busy. But sometimes at night, when everything was quiet, she would find herself scrolling through their old messages, smiling at the memories and missing him even more. One night, after a long day at work, her phone buzzed. It was a video call from him. She answered quickly, her face lighting up when she saw his smile. "Hey," he said. "How's my favorite person doing?" "Tired," she said, laughing softly. "Work's been crazy," he nodded. "Same here, but hearing your voice makes it better." They talked for hours that night. It felt almost like old times, joking, teasing, talking about everything and nothing. When they finally said goodnight, she felt warmth in her chest. Maybe distance wasn't going to break them after all. Days turned into months. They found ways to stay close, sending small surprises, handwritten letters, photos from their daily lives. Sometimes he'd send her a picture of his morning coffee with the caption, "Wish you were here." She would reply with a photo of her tea and write, "You're still here in a way." But distance wasn't easy. There were days when she felt frustrated and lonely. Days when she questioned if long-distance love could really last. But every time doubt crept in, he reminded her why it was worth it. He never let her feel forgotten. One evening, when she had a rough day at work and didn't feel like talking, he sent her a message that made her tear up. "Even on your worst days, I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you think." It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. His words gave her the strength to keep going. Time passed slowly. Seasons changed. There were moments of silence between them. Days when work kept them too busy to talk. Nights when she fell asleep waiting for his message. But love, real love, doesn't disappear just because life gets loud. It stays quiet but strong, waiting to be felt again. Then one evening, months later, her phone rang. It was him, but his voice sounded different, lighter, happier. "I have news," he said, barely able to hide his excitement. "What is it?" she asked, smiling without knowing why. "I'm coming home," he said. "They're transferring me back. It's official." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy ones. "You're serious?" "Completely," he said. "And this time I'm not leaving again." That night she couldn't stop smiling. It felt unreal. The person she had missed for so long was finally coming back. All those months of waiting, all those quiet nights, they were worth it. When they met again, it felt like no time had passed. He looked the same, maybe a little more tired from all the work, but his eyes still held that same calm warmth. As soon as she saw him, every worry, every bit of distance disappeared. He walked toward her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then he whispered, "Told you I'd come back." She laughed softly, tears filling her eyes. "You kept your promise," he nodded. "And I'm keeping another one too." "What's that?" she asked. "I'm never letting distance come between us again." From that day, things slowly fell back into place. They went back to their old habits, meeting for coffee, walking by the lake, sharing stories late into the night. But something had changed too. Their bond had grown stronger. The time apart had tested them, and they had passed the test. One evening, as they sat on the same park bench where everything began, she looked at him and said, "You know, I used to think love was about grand gestures, big confessions, dramatic moments," he smiled. "And now?" "Now I know it's about consistency," she said. "It's about showing up, even from miles away." He took her hand gently. "You showed up too," he said. "That's why we're here." They sat there quietly, watching the sky turn gold. It wasn't a fairy tale scene. It was simple. Two people side by side after everything life had thrown at them. But that simplicity was what made it beautiful. Later, as they walked back to their cars, she thought about how much had changed since the day they met. What started as a short coffee date had become something she couldn't imagine her life without. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Because she had learned that love wasn't about being together all the time. It was about choosing each other. Again and again, even when it was hard. That night, as she lay in bed, she looked at the photo of them from earlier that day. He was smiling, his arm around her shoulders. And she was laughing, really laughing, the kind that comes from the heart. She whispered to herself, "He gave me forever without even trying." And for the first time in a long time, she felt certain. Some people come into your life not to change who you are, but to remind you what it feels like to be truly loved. The day finally came when everything felt like it was falling into place. After months of laughter, quiet conversations, and small shared moments, he returned to stay, not just to visit, but to be part of her life every day. When she saw him waiting at the train station, her heart raced. It wasn't the nervous, unsure feeling she had at the beginning. This was different. It was calm, steady, and full of certainty. She ran toward him and he opened his arms. They hugged for a long time, holding each other in a way that said everything they had gone through. The distance, the waiting, the longing had all been worth it. "I missed you," she whispered. "I never stopped thinking about you," he replied softly, holding her tighter. They walked home together, hands intertwined. The city was bustling around them, but for a moment it felt like the world had paused. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The presence of each other was enough. That evening, they went to the park, their special place on the bench where so many important moments had started. He held her hand as they sat, and she realized how comfortable she felt with him. She didn't have to be someone else, didn't have to hide her fears, didn't have to impress him. She could just be herself. You know, he said quietly. I thought I knew what love was, but I didn't. Not until I met you. She looked at him surprised. Me? Yes, he said, his eyes shining. You taught me that love isn't just about passion or excitement. It's about trust, patience, and being there for someone, even when it's not easy. She felt warmth spread through her chest. She had learned that same lesson from him. His calm presence, his steady kindness had made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt for years. She realized that love wasn't a spark or a grand gesture. It was quiet, consistent, and powerful in ways words couldn't fully capture. They spent the evening walking along the lake, talking about everything they had experienced over the past months. They laughed about the small mishaps like spilled coffee or missed trains. They shared stories of times they had felt lonely or unsure. And through it all, they realized how much they had grown together. Later, as the sun set, he stopped walking and turned to her. I want to ask you something, he said, his voice steady but soft. Her heart skipped a beat. What is it? He took both her hands in his. I don't want to imagine my life without you. Will you share your life with me? Will you be my partner? Not just for now, but for always. Her eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined a moment like this. She thought about all the short dates, the uncertainty, the distance, and every small step that had led to this. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. He smiled, relief and happiness shining in his eyes. They hugged again, holding on to each other as if the world around them didn't exist. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks. Just two people finally choosing each other. The days that followed were filled with small joys. They cooked together, laughed over burnt meals, and sat late into the night talking about their dreams. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, just sitting together in comfortable silence. It was simple, ordinary, and perfect. One evening, they went to the same cafe where they had met for the very first time. It felt like a full circle. He held her hand across the table and said, Do you remember this place? Of course, she said, smiling. I was supposed to be in and out in 30 minutes. He laughed softly. And look at us now. She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that life's unexpected moments, the ones she hadn't planned or anticipated, had given her something she had once thought was impossible. Weeks turned into months, and every day they spent together strengthened their bond. They faced challenges like disagreements and misunderstandings, but they handled them with care. They had learned patience, compromise, and the importance of listening. She remembered how she used to avoid relationships, scared of getting hurt. Now she couldn't imagine life without him. He had shown her that love wasn't about being perfect or finding someone flawless. It was about finding someone who chose you every day, through small actions, understanding, and care. One rainy afternoon, they decided to stay in and make hot chocolate at home. She laughed as he spilled cocoa on the counter. You're terrible at this, she teased. He grinned, wiping the mess. Maybe, but I'm learning from the best teacher in the world. She shook her head, laughing. I think you're exaggerating. No, he said, smiling warmly. You make everything feel better. Even hot chocolate that almost ruined the kitchen. They spent the evening talking, joking, and sharing quiet moments. She realized that love didn't have to be dramatic or public. It was the simple, ordinary things, making tea together, walking in the rain, sending a small message, that made life meaningful. Months later, they moved in together. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was a natural step in a relationship built on trust and patience. Their home was small but warm. They filled it with memories, pictures, little notes, souvenirs from their walks. Every corner reflected their shared life. Her friends noticed the change in her. She smiled more, laughed more, and carried herself with a lightness she hadn't had before. One of them said, You look like a completely different person. She smiled and said simply, I've found someone who makes life better, just by being in it. And he did. It wasn't grand gestures or dramatic surprises that defined their love. It was his calmness when she was stressed, her laughter that brightened his days, their shared silences that felt more comforting than any words. Years passed, but their bond only grew stronger. They celebrated small victories together, comforted each other during failures, and always made time for the little things, the things that made their love steady and real. One evening, while sitting together on their porch watching the sunset, she turned to him. "Do you remember our first date?" He smiled, holding her hand. "How could I forget? You were supposed to stay for 30 minutes. And look at us now," she said, laughing softly. "Yes," he said, "and I wouldn't change a single second of it." She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. She thought about all the short dates, the distance, the challenges, and realized that every moment had led to this, to a life filled with love, understanding, and quiet happiness. That night, as she lay beside him, she whispered softly, "I came for a short date, but you gave me forever." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I'll keep giving it to you every day." It wasn't a story of instant passion or sudden love. It was a story of patience, trust, and the small, meaningful choices that built a life together. Every message, every walk, every laugh, and every shared silence had brought them here. They didn't need grand declarations or fairy tale moments. Their love was in the ordinary, the everyday, the moments that most people overlook. It was quiet, steady, and real, the kind of love that lasts a lifetime. She smiled as she closed her eyes, feeling the certainty she had once thought was impossible. He was her choice, her peace, and her forever. And in that moment she realized something profound. Sometimes life gives you far more than you ask for. Sometimes a short date turns into a lifetime. Sometimes the person who arrives quietly in your life changes everything without you even realizing it. She had come looking for a brief escape from loneliness, but she had found something eternal. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't just hopeful about love, she was living it.